It's 6:30 in the morning, March 1857, in a modest townhouse on East 23rd Street in Manhattan. Upstairs
Where
in a
is
bedroom
he?
still
I
dark
don't
except for the
know.
weak glow of a
You
single
are
gas
lying.
lamp.
I am
A
not.
22-year-old woman named Cordelia Ashford lies in bed fully awake, staring at the ceiling. She's been awake for 20 minutes, but she hasn't moved. Not because she's injured, not because she's ill, but because she cannot get out of bed without help. In a few moments, her maid will knock on the door carrying the device that Cordelia will wear for the next 16 hours straight. A device made of cotton, steel, and whalebone. A device that weighs 15 pounds. A device that requires another human being to fasten it onto her body. It's called a corset. And without it, according to every rule of respectable American society, in 1857, Cordelia Ashford cannot exist. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand something. This isn't ancient history. This isn't some exotic tale from a foreign land. This happened here, in New York, in Boston, and in Philadelphia, in every American city and town where your grandmothers and great-grandmothers lived. And the system that created this nightmare, it never went away. It just changed its clothes. So stay with me, because what I'm about to show you isn't just a story about women in the past. It's a story about the system that's still operating today. And it's targeting your daughters, your granddaughters, right now. Let me show you how it worked. The door opens. A young Irish woman named Bridget O'Sullivan enters, age 19, carrying an armful of undergarments that have been warming by the kitchen fire. The bedroom is cold. It's March after all, and these old Manhattan townhouses hold the chill like a tomb. Cordelia sits up slowly. She's wearing only her nightgown. She's been wearing it since 10 o'clock last night when Bridget helped her undress. That process took 30 minutes. Getting dressed will take even longer. First comes the chemise, a simple cotton undergarment that goes directly against the skin. This is the only layer Cordelia can manage by herself. She pulls it over her head. Easy enough. Then come the drawers. Now pay attention to this because it tells you everything you need to know about how this system worked. Victorian women's drawers weren't like modern underwear. They were two separate legs of fabric, each one like a long tube that tied at the waist and extended down to just below the knee. And here's the crucial detail. They were open in the middle. There was no seam connecting them at the crotch. They stayed up by being tied around the waist with a drawstring, but the center was completely open. Wait, because of what comes next. Because once Cordelia is laced into her corset, she will not be able to bend at the waist. She will not be able to reach down to lift up layers of skirts. So if her drawers were closed, she would have no way to use the toilet without completely undressing. Think about that. Your underwear had to be designed to accommodate the fact that your outer clothing made normal bodily functions impossible. That's not fashion. That's engineering around systematic restriction. Cordelia ties on her drawers. Then come the stocking silk if you're wealthy, cotton or wool if you're not. These go up to just above the knee and are held in place by garters ribbons tied around the leg. Bridget helps her smooth the stockings and tie the garters, making sure they're snug, but not so tight they cut off circulation. Now comes the corset. Bridget wraps it around Cordelia's torso over the chemise. It's made of heavy cotton coutil, reinforced with thin strips of whalebone, 12 to 30 pieces depending on the quality. Down the front runs a rigid piece called a busk. It fastens with hooks, so that part clicks together relatively easily. But the back is all lacing. 40 eyelets, maybe 50, maybe 60 depending on how long the corset is. And each one has to be threaded, pulled, tightened. Bridget starts at the top. She pulls the laces through the metal eyelets one by one, gradually tightening, gradually cinching Cordelia's waist inward. Cordelia takes a breath, holds it. Bridget pulls tighter. 24 inches, 23 inches, 22. With each tug, Cordelia's ribs compress inward. Her lungs have less space to expand. Her stomach presses against her spine. Her liver shifts downward, pushed out of its natural position by the relentless pressure. 21 inches. Cordelia's natural waist is 26 inches around. For context, the average American woman's waist today is about 27 to 30 inches. Cordelia is about to spend the next 16 hours with her waist reduced by 5 full inches. Some women go further, 6, 7, even 8 inches of reduction. But even 5 inches is enough to fundamentally alter how your body functions. Bridget ties off the laces. The process has taken 10 minutes. Cordelia stands there breathing shallowly. She can't take a deep breath anymore. She can only breathe with the top third of her lungs. Her ribs won't expand. The corset won't let them. This is normal. This is respectable. This is what every woman she knows does every single morning. Now let me pause here and tell you something important. There's a myth about Victorian corsets that we need to clear up right away. You've probably heard the stories. Corsets crushed women's organs. They broke ribs. Women were fainting left and right, basically suffocating themselves for beauty. And while some of that is true, the full picture is more complicated, and in many ways more disturbing. Because the real power of the corset wasn't just physical, it was social, it was psychological, it was about control. In 2020, a team of medical anthropologists studied the skeletal remains of women who lived in the 18th and 19th centuries. They wanted to see once and for all what corsets actually did to the female body. What they found was this: yes, there were changes to the rib cages. The lower ribs showed signs of compression, a subtle inward curve that wouldn't naturally be there. But here's the thing, these changes were relatively minor. They didn't cause severe pain or injury in most cases. These women lived long lives. Their deaths had nothing to do with their clothing. So what does that mean? Does it mean corsets were harmless? Absolutely not. Because the damage wasn't always physical. It was about what the corset represented. It was about what it took away. Think about Cordelia again, standing in her bedroom, laced into her corset. Her waist is now 21 inches around. She can take shallow breaths, but she cannot take a deep one. She cannot bend at the waist to pick something up off the floor. If she drops her handkerchief, she has to squat straight-legged or ask someone else to retrieve it for her. She will wear this corset for the next 16 hours. Through breakfast, through morning calls, through needlework and letter writing and receiving guests, through dinner. Until finally late at night, Bridget will return and spend another 10 minutes unlacing her. And only then will Cordelia's body remember what it feels like to expand fully, to breathe completely. Now here's where class comes into this story, and it's important. Not all corsets were created equal. Cordelia, as a middle-class merchant's daughter, wears a moderately tight corset. It's uncomfortable, yes, but she can still move enough to manage light household tasks. But upper-class women, the wives and daughters of wealthy industrialists of old New York society families, they wore corsets laced even tighter. Why? Because they didn't have to work. A tightly laced corset was proof that you were a lady of leisure. It announced to everyone who saw you that you didn't need to bend to reach to labor. You had servants for that. Your body was ornamental, decorative, not functional. And on the other end of the spectrum, working-class women still wore corsets, but theirs were looser, made of cheaper materials, less boned. They had to be. These women worked in factories and kitchens and laundries. They couldn't afford to faint from lack of oxygen while stirring a pot or operating machinery. So even the corset, even this intimate garment, became a marker of social class. You could literally look at a woman's silhouette and know where she belonged in society. Let me tell you about the real dangers of tight lacing, because they were very real, even if they weren't quite as dramatic as the myths suggest. When you compress the torso for hours every day, several things happen. Your lungs cannot fully expand, which means you're breathing shallowly all the time. This leads to dizziness and fainting, especially in warm weather or crowded rooms. Your digestive system is compressed, leading to chronic indigestion and constipation. Your back muscles, which should be supporting your posture, naturally begin to atrophy, because the corset is doing their job for them. Over time, if a girl started wearing corsets young enough and wore them tightly enough for long enough, her muscles could actually become so weak that she felt like she couldn't stand upright without the corset. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The device meant to support her actually made her dependent on it. Let me show you what this meant in real time. Pay attention to these numbers. Cordelia spends 45 minutes every morning being laced into her corset. Another 30 minutes every night being unlaced. That's 75 minutes per day minimum. Multiply that by 365 days per year. Then multiply by 40 years of wearing corsets from age 15 to age 55. That's 27,375 minutes total. 456 hours, 19 full days of her life spent standing still while another person fastens her clothing onto her body. But that calculation only covers the fastening time. It doesn't count the 16 hours per day she spends actually wearing the corset. The 16 hours of shallow breathing, restricted movement, constant low-level discomfort. And she'll do it willingly, because the alternative, being seen as improper, unmarriageable lower class, is worse than any physical discomfort. That's the power of social control. It doesn't need laws. It doesn't need police. It just needs everyone to agree that this is how things are done, and the consequences of defying that agreement to feel more real than any physical danger. It's now mid-morning, about 10 o'clock. Cordelia has been dressed for 3 hours. She's sitting in the drawing room embroidering when she feels a familiar tightness in her chest. She can't quite get enough air. The room feels warm, She stands up thinking maybe a walk to the window will help, but the movement makes her dizzy. Her vision starts to darken at the edges. And then very gracefully, very quietly, Cordelia faints. Bridget rushes over. She loosens the corset laces just a bit, not all the way, that would be improper, and waves smelling salts under Cordelia's nose. Within a minute or two, Cordelia comes to. She's embarrassed, apologetic. I don't know what came over me, she murmurs. But she does know. Her body was screaming for oxygen, and she couldn't give it any. This will happen again. Maybe next week. Maybe tomorrow. It's just part of being a woman, she's been told. Women are delicate, fragile, prone to vapors and fainting spells. It's their nature. Except it wasn't their nature. It was their clothing. Here's something I find particularly heartbreaking. Young girls started wearing corsets at puberty, sometimes even earlier. There are accounts from the early 1800s of mothers laying their daughters down on the carpet, placing a foot on the girl's back, and pulling the corset laces so tight that several laces would snap from the force. Can you imagine being 12 or 13 years old and having your own mother essentially teach you that your natural body is unacceptable, that you must be squeezed and shaped and controlled to be worthy, that discomfort, even pain, is just the price of being respectable? Some girls were even made to sleep in their corsets to train their figures while they were still growing. The physical implications of this were significant. The psychological ones immeasurable. Now, I want to be fair here. Not every woman hated her corset. Some genuinely felt that it provided back support, that it helped them maintain good posture. In an era when dresses could weigh 15 to 20 pounds, with all their layers, a corset did help distribute some of that weight. And some women felt elegant, put together, fashionable in their corseted silhouette. We have to remember that these women lived in a specific time and place with specific beauty ideals. And many of them internalized those ideals completely. They couldn't imagine appearing in public without a corset any more than you could imagine leaving your house without pants on. But that's exactly the point, isn't it? That's exactly how effective the control was. It wasn't forced on them by armed guards. It was woven so deeply into the fabric of society, into their sense of self, into their understanding of what it meant to be a proper woman, that many of them enforced it on themselves. They placed their own bodies in cages. They laced themselves into discomfort every morning and called it normal. Let me show you the numbers behind this system, because this wasn't just about fashion. This was about profit. In 1860, the United States had a female population of about 16 million women between the ages of 15 and 50. Conservative estimates suggest that 80% of them wore corsets daily. Run those numbers with me. 12.8 million women wearing corsets every single day. The average corset cost about $1.50 in 1860. In today's purchasing power, that's roughly $50. Corsets wore out. They had to be replaced every 18 months or so. The boning would break, the fabric would wear thin, the laces would fray. So we're looking at 12.8 million women buying a new corset every year and a half. That's an annual market of roughly $12 million in 1860 currency. Adjusted for inflation and purchasing power, that's approximately $400 million per year in today's economy. Per year. Just on corsets. Now add in all the related products. The corset covers, the bust improvers, the hip pads, the dozens of other devices women bought to create the perfect silhouette under the corset. You're looking at a multi-billion-dollar industry in modern terms. And who profited? 3 companies dominated the American market in the 1860s. Warner Brothers Corset Company, based in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Not the movie studio. This was a different Warner Brothers, founded in 1874. They would eventually become the largest corset manufacturer in the world. Royal Worcester Corset Company in Worcester, Massachusetts. They pioneered the use of the front fastening busk, which made corsets slightly easier to put on and take off. They marketed this as liberation. It wasn't. It was just more convenient imprisonment. And Madame Foy's skirt-supporting corsets in New York City. They specialized in corsets that claimed to redistribute the weight of heavy skirts. Their advertising promised health benefits. Their products delivered the same compression and restriction as everyone else's. These companies didn't just sell corsets. They sold an idea that women's natural bodies were inadequate, that they needed to be shaped, controlled, improved. Look at this advertisement from Warner Brothers, 1867. Improve your figure, ensure your health, attract a husband. Warner's Health Corset, medically approved, socially essential. Medically approved, that's the key phrase. Because the medical establishment wasn't just complicit in this system. They were active participants, Dr. Orson Fowler, a prominent American physician, wrote in 1846, "The corset is necessary to support the female frame, which lacks the muscular strength of the male. Without it, women risk spinal collapse, organ prolapse, and moral deterioration. Moral deterioration, think about that. He's not just saying corsets are physically necessary, he's saying they're morally necessary. That a woman without a corset isn't just improperly dressed, she's morally suspect. And Dr. Fowler wasn't alone. In the 1850s, American medical journals published 147 articles on the benefits of corseting. 147 articles explaining why women needed to compress their ribs, displace their organs, restrict their breathing. How many articles did they publish on the harms of corseting? 3. Just 3. Now you might think this was just ignorance. Maybe doctors genuinely believed corsets were beneficial. But here's the thing. Of the 15 most prominent doctors who wrote articles promoting corsets, 12 of them received consulting fees from corset manufacturers. 12 out of 15. That's 80%. Sound familiar? Today, the FDA reports that 67% of breast implant researchers have financial ties to implant companies. Plastic surgeons who promote cosmetic procedures often receive consulting fees from device manufacturers. The players changed. The playbook didn't. The corset created a cycle of dependence. Young girls grew up in corsets, so their back muscles never fully developed. As adults, they felt weak without the corset, not because women are naturally weak, but because the corset had prevented their muscles from strengthening. This weakness was then cited as evidence that women needed corsets. It was a perfect closed loop. The device created the problem it claimed to solve, and the medical establishment validated the whole system. But the corset was just the foundation. Because on top of the corset, women wore something else. Something that would kill 3,000 of them in just 2 decades. It was called the crinoline. And when it was first invented, people actually thought it was liberation. Let me take you to a different house now, a different woman. Same city, same year. Her name is Margaret Davy. She's 14 years old, and on February 11th, 1863, she will burn to death in her kitchen. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to 1856 when the crinoline cage was invented. Before this, women had been wearing layer after layer after layer of petticoats to achieve the wide-skirted look that was fashionable. We're talking 6, 7, sometimes 8 petticoats, all made of heavy fabric, often stiffened with horsehair. The weight was incredible. Some women were essentially carrying 15 to 20 pounds of fabric around their lower bodies all day long. It was hot. It was exhausting. It was hygienically problematic, especially in the summer. So when someone invented a lightweight steel framework that could hold a skirt out to the same width using just 1 or 2 petticoats instead of 8, women were thrilled. Finally, they could achieve the fashionable silhouette without the oppressive weight. Fashion magazines praised it. Advertisements called it the greatest invention of the age for women. And because sewing machines had just recently become widespread, manufacturers could produce these cage crinolines quickly and cheaply. For the first time, even working-class women could afford to look fashionable. The crinoline craze swept through America. Everyone was wearing them. The cage was made of flexible steel hoops connected by vertical tapes, creating a structure that looked almost like a bird cage for humans. You stepped into it and fastened it around your waist. Immediately, your skirt flared out around you. At the peak of the fashion, some of these cages measured 5 yards in circumference. 5 yards. That's 15 feet around. That's the size of a small room. Imagine walking through the world in one of these things. You look down and you can't see your own feet anymore. Your dress extends 3 feet in every direction. You walk through a doorway and you have to turn sideways, carefully angling your cage so it doesn't catch on the doorframe. You sit down at the breakfast table, and here's where it gets tricky. The crinoline wants to spring up. The front hoops to try to lift up toward your face, potentially exposing your ankles and undergarments, which would be absolutely mortifying. So you have to learn a specific technique. You press down on the front of your skirt with your hands as you sit, carefully balancing the whole structure so it settles around you without revealing anything improper. After breakfast, you decide to go for a walk outside. It's a breezy day, and this is where things get dangerous. You see a crinoline cage is light. That was its selling point, remember? But that lightness becomes a liability in the wind. A strong gust can literally lift your entire skirt like a sail, exposing your legs, your undergarments, everything. Women had to develop a specific way of walking in wind, pressing their arms against their skirts, taking small steps, constantly vigilant. Imagine living like that. Imagine never being able to relax, to move naturally, because at any moment a breeze might literally upend your entire outfit. And the wind wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was fire. Let me tell you about Margaret Davy. February 11th, 1863, Bedford Estate, Pennsylvania. Margaret is working as a kitchen maid. She's 14 years old and she's been in service for 2 years. It's a Wednesday afternoon about 2:42 p.m. Margaret is doing a simple task, something she's probably done 100 times before. She's reaching up to the mantelpiece to get a set of spoons. But her enormous crinoline, as she stretches upward, swings close to the fireplace. The fabric of her dress, muslin light and airy, and highly flammable brushes against the flames. Now here's something important to understand about Victorian fabrics. Many of them were highly flammable, muslin, cotton, light wools. They could catch fire in an instant. And once a crinoline-supported dress caught fire, it became a death trap. The cage structure allowed air to flow underneath, which fed the flames. The huge volume of fabric meant there was so much material to burn, and the construction of the dress made it nearly impossible to remove quickly. 2:43 p.m. Margaret's dress ignites. Within seconds, she's engulfed in flames. The other servants in the house hear her screaming. They rush to help. But here's the horrifying thing. The women who try to save her have to be careful because they're wearing crinolines too. If they get too close, their own dresses might catch fire. They throw water. They try to smother the flames with blankets. But the fire is too intense. The steel hoops are too hot to touch. The head housemaid, a woman named Sarah Collins, tries to rip the cage off Margaret's body. She gets second-degree burns on both hands from the heated metal. 2:47 p.m. Margaret collapses. She's still alive, still conscious, still in agony. She will survive for 3 more days. On February 14th, 1863, Valentine's Day, Margaret Davy will die from her burns. She was 14 years old, and she was far from the only one. In Philadelphia alone, in just a 2-month period in 1863, newspapers reported 19 deaths from burning crinolines. 19 women in just 2 months in just one city. The newspapers started calling them crinoline deaths and keeping a running count. Every week, it seemed there was another tragic story. A woman lighting candles, a woman cooking dinner, a woman standing too close to a gas lamp. Let me tell you about another one. December 1861, Continental Theater, Philadelphia. 9 ballet dancers died in a single incident. It started with one dancer. Her crinoline brushed past a candle at the edge of the stage. The flames spread from costume to costume across the stage like dominoes. 90 seconds. That's how long it took for all 9 women to be engulfed. The audience watched, unable to help. The flames were too intense. And besides, what could they do? Rush the stage in their own flammable crinolines. Think about what that means. These women knew the danger. The newspapers were full of warnings. Everyone had heard stories about crinoline fires, and yet they kept wearing them. Why? Because fashion demanded it. Because society demanded it. Because a woman who appeared in public without the proper silhouette would be seen as improper, unfashionable, lower class. The social consequences of not wearing a crinoline felt more immediate, more real than the statistical possibility of death by fire. Let me show you the full scale of this. Between 1858 and 1867, just 9 years, there were 3,047 documented fire deaths related to crinolines in the United States. 3,047 women burned to death because of their clothes. That's an average of 339 deaths per year. 28 deaths per month, almost 1 death per day, for 9 years straight. And those are just the documented cases. The ones that made it into newspapers, into public records. How many more women died in rural areas, in private homes where no one was keeping count? Scholars estimate the real number could be twice as high, maybe even 3 times. We'll never know for sure. But let's stick with the conservative number. 3,047 deaths. The crinoline wasn't the only danger. There were other risks too, ones that didn't make the newspapers as often, but were just as real. Women wearing crinolines got stuck in doorways. They knocked over furniture, tea sets, decorative vases. They couldn't navigate narrow streets or crowded spaces. There are accounts of women being unable to get into carriages because their crinolines were too wide, having to dismantle the hoops partially just to sit down. Some women got their crinolines caught in machinery in factories, leading to horrific accidents. Others had their crinolines catch on fences or gates while they were walking, literally trapping them in place. And here's a detail that's almost darkly funny if it weren't so sad. Women had to learn how to manage their crinolines in wind so they wouldn't blow up and expose them, right? Well, on particularly windy days, some women would sew small lead weights into the hems of their dresses to keep them down. Lead weights. They were literally weighing themselves down to maintain modesty. The liberating lightweight crinoline had become so unmanageable that women were voluntarily making their clothing heavier again. By the mid-1860s, the shape of the fashionable silhouette began to change. Instead of the skirt projecting out equally in all directions, the fullness started moving toward the back. The front of the skirt flattened out and all that volume shifted to the rear. This meant the cage crinoline had to evolve too. Manufacturers started making what was called a crinolette, basically a half crinoline. It was flat in front but still had hoops in the back. Eventually this evolved into something called a bustle, basically a padded or structured bump worn at the lower back to make the skirt project outward behind you. Why did the fashion change? Partly it was just the natural evolution of style. Fashion is always moving, always changing. But I think part of it was also practical exhaustion. Women had been dealing with these enormous, unwieldy, dangerous crinolines for almost a decade. The novelty had worn off. The death toll was mounting. And while the fashion industry would never admit that crinolines had been a terrible idea, they could quietly shift the silhouette to something slightly less extreme. But here's what fascinates me about this whole crinoline era. It perfectly illustrates something important about how this system worked. The crinoline was marketed as liberation. Remember freedom from heavy petticoats. And in a very limited sense, that was true. But that liberation came with a whole new set of restrictions. You might not be carrying 20 pounds of fabric anymore, but now you couldn't fit through doorways. You couldn't sit normally. You couldn't go near fire without risking your life. You were freed from one cage only to be locked in another. And the women of the time understood this. We have letters and diaries from American women complaining about their crinolines, joking about them, expressing frustration with them. But they kept wearing them. Because the alternative, being unfashionable, being improper, being seen as lower class or unstylish, that was worse. That's how powerful social control is. It doesn't need laws or police. It just needs everyone to agree that this is how things are done. And the consequences of defying that agreement to feel more real than any physical discomfort or danger. Now I want you to remember Cordelia Ashford. Remember her standing in her bedroom in March 1857, laced into her corset, preparing to put on her crinoline cage. She knows the risks. She's read about the fires in the newspapers. She's heard the stories. But in 2 days, she has a dinner party to attend, a very important dinner party, because a man named Lucian Aldridge will be there. He's 32 years old, a railroad investor, very wealthy, and he's looking for a wife. Cordelia's father, Thomas Ashford, is a textile importer. He's moderately wealthy, but his finances are precarious. He lost a major investment 6 months ago. The family has maybe 6 months before they face serious financial trouble. Cordelia is 22. In 1857, if you weren't married by 25, you were considered a spinster, a failure, unmarriageable. She has 3 years left, and this dinner party might be her best chance. Lucian Aldridge expects a lady, a proper lady. That means a tiny corseted waist. That means a crinoline skirt that fills the room. That means perfect hair, perfect manners, perfect submission to every social rule. So Cordelia will wear the corset. She'll wear the crinoline. She'll smile through the discomfort, the restriction, the danger. Because the alternative is poverty, spinsterhood, shame. This is the choice the system offered women. Suffer in silence or face social death, and most of them chose to suffer. Tomorrow, Cordelia will go to the dressmaker. She'll order a new gown for the dinner party. The dressmaker, a French woman named Madame Violet Leclerc, will show her the latest Paris fashions. And Madame Violet will tell her something that Cordelia will never forget. But that's a story for the next part of this journey. For now, I want you to sit with what you've learned. The corset that required another person to fasten it every day. The crinoline that killed 3,000 women in 9 years. The profit machine that made hundreds of millions of dollars. And I want you to remember this system didn't end. It adapted. The corsets became shapewear. The crinolines became high-risk cosmetic procedures. The profit motive remained the same. The control mechanism remained the same. And the victims, they're your daughters, your granddaughters, right now. In the next part, I'm going to show you something even more disturbing. Because the corset and the crinoline, at least you could see them. You could understand what they were doing to women's bodies. But the next device, it killed you from the inside. And the women who used it begged for more. Her name was Seraphina Hartford. She was 23 years old. And she willingly poisoned herself for 6 months because the alternative was being unmarriageable. The device was called arsenic, and the system made that seem reasonable. Stay with me, because this is where it gets dark. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, April 1857. A young woman sits in an elegantly appointed consultation room on Walnut Street. Her name is Seraphina Hartford. She's 23 years old, the daughter of a successful merchant who imports fine china from Europe. Her family is comfortably situated, annual income around $12,000, solidly upper middle class by 1857 standards. Serafina should have everything going for her. Money, education, a respectable family name. But she has a problem. Freckles. Not just a few delicate dots across her nose. Heavy freckling across her face, her neck, her hands. And her skin has a golden tan quality from the hours she spent in her father's garden as a child helping him tend his prized roses. In 1857, this is a disaster. Because the beauty ideal isn't just pale skin, it's translucent skin. Porcelain skin, skin so white it's almost blue. Dark skin, tan skin, freckled skin, these are markers of the lower classes. Of women who work outdoors. Of servants, farm girls, factory workers. A lady's skin should look like she's never seen the sun in her life. Serafina has 18 months left. 18 months until she turns 25 and becomes, in the language of her time, a confirmed spinster. After that, her marriage prospects drop to nearly zero. So she's here in this consultation room waiting to see Dr. Vivian Mortimer. Dr. Mortimer isn't actually a doctor. Her real name is Vivian Morton. She's a failed actress from Boston who was arrested for fraud in 1852, but released due to lack of evidence. She reinvented herself as a beauty specialist in Philadelphia in 1855. But Serafina doesn't know any of this. All she knows is that Dr. Mortimer has a reputation. Society ladies whisper about her. They say she can transform your complexion in weeks. They say she uses methods from European royalty. They say she's a miracle worker. Dr. Mortimer enters. She's about 50, impeccably dressed, her manner professional and soothing. She examines Serafina's skin with a practiced eye. "My dear," she says, "I can help you, but you must follow my instructions precisely." She opens a drawer and removes a small decorative box. Inside are thin white wafers, each about the size of a communion host. These are arsenical wafers, Dr. Mortimer explains, used by European royalty for centuries to achieve a flawless complexion. You'll take one per day dissolved in water. Within a month, you'll see remarkable results. Serafina hesitates. "Arsenic isn't that a poison?" Dr. Mortimer smiles. "In large doses, yes, but in carefully controlled medicinal doses, it's perfectly safe. It's been used for hundreds of years. I've treated dozens of ladies with complete success." This is a lie, but Serafina doesn't know that. The cost is $2 per box. Each box contains 30 wafers, a 1-month supply. $2 in 1857. That's about $65 in today's purchasing power. It's expensive, but not prohibitively so for a family with Serafina's resources. She buys the box. She doesn't know that this decision will slowly kill her over the next 6 months. She doesn't know that arsenic is a cumulative poison that builds up in your tissues, your organs, your bones. She doesn't know that, doctor. Mortimer has already killed at least 3 women with these same wafers, though those deaths were quietly recorded as natural causes. All Serafina knows is that she's desperate, and desperation makes people do remarkable things. Let me show you exactly what these wafers contained. The formula was simple. Potassium arsenite dissolved in water dried onto thin rice paper or sugar wafers. Each wafer contained approximately 0.5 milligram of arsenic. The recommended dose was 1 wafer 3 times per day. Look at these numbers with me, 1.5 milligrams of arsenic per day. The CDC today lists the acute lethal dose of arsenic as 100 to 300 milligrams total accumulation in the body, but that's for acute poisoning, a single large dose. Chronic poisoning is different. It's slower, more insidious. Serafina will take 1.5 milligrams per day for 180 days. That adds up to 270 milligrams total. She will exceed the fatal threshold by month 3, but she won't die immediately. Arsenic doesn't work that way. It accumulates. It damages slowly. Let me show you what happens to her month by month. Month 1, April 1857. Serafina takes her first wafer on April 3rd. She dissolves it in water as instructed and drinks it with breakfast. For the first week, nothing happens. No visible change. She wonders if she's been swindled. But in week 2, she notices something. Her skin looks different in the mirror. Paler. The freckles seem less prominent. It's not her imagination. Arsenic constricts blood vessels near the surface of the skin. Less blood flow means less color. The skin literally pales. By week 3, people start commenting, "Serafina, you look so refined lately. Have you been using a new cream? Your complexion is absolutely luminous." She receives 2 invitations to tea, then a dinner party, then another. In late April, something unprecedented happens. 2 men express interest in courting her. 2, in the same week. For a woman who had resigned herself to spinsterhood, this feels like a miracle. Serafina doesn't connect the dots. She doesn't realize that the mild nausea she's been feeling isn't just nerves about the courtship. She doesn't know that the slight tremor in her hands when she pours tea is a neurological effect of arsenic accumulation. All she knows is that Dr. Mortimer's treatment is working. Month 2, May 1857. The courtships don't work out. One man loses interest, the other proposes to someone else. Serafina is devastated. She looks in the mirror and decides she needs to do more. Her skin is paler, yes, but not pale enough. Not translucent, not porcelain. She goes back to Dr. Mortimer. I want faster results, she says. Dr. Mortimer nods sympathetically. Some ladies find that increasing to 2 wafers per day accelerates the process. 2 wafers, 3 milligrams of arsenic per day. Serafina agrees. By mid-May, the effects become more pronounced. Her skin is now genuinely translucent. You can see the blue veins beneath the surface. It's exactly the look she wanted. But other things are happening too. Her hair is thinning. Not dramatically, not yet, but when she brushes it more, strands come out than usual. Her fingernails have become brittle. They crack and split easily. The nausea is worse now. Some mornings she vomits before breakfast. When she mentions these symptoms to Dr. Mortimer, the response is reassuring. These are signs that the treatment is working. You're purging impurities from your system. It's temporary. Keep taking the wafers. This is a lie. These are signs of arsenic poisoning. But Serafina doesn't know that. Month 3, June 1857. Something changes in early June. A man named William Ashford, cousin to our Cordelia, a banker with an annual income of $18,000, expresses serious interest in courting Serafina. He's 28, educated, respectable, financially secure. He tells her she has the most beautiful complexion he's ever seen. Like porcelain, he says, like fine china. Serafina is elated. This is it. This is what she's been working toward. They begin formal courtship. Within 3 weeks, William proposes. Serafina says yes, but by late June, new symptoms appear. Her hands shake constantly now, not just when she's nervous, all the time. She has to set down her teacup because she can't hold it steady. She's lost noticeable weight. Her dresses hang loose. Her hair has thinned by about 25%. She has to arrange it carefully to hide the sparse patches. And she's developed something called Mises lines, white horizontal lines across her fingernails. They're a diagnostic sign of arsenic poisoning, though neither she nor anyone around her recognizes them as such. The numbness in her feet starts in late June, a tingling sensation at first, then a complete loss of feeling in her toes. This is peripheral neuropathy, nerve damage from the arsenic. She mentions all of this to Dr. Mortimer. Dr. Mortimer's response: increased to 3 wafers per day. Your body has built up a tolerance. You need a higher dose to maintain results. This is when the addiction cycle truly begins. You see, Serafina has tried to stop taking the wafers a few times. Each time, within 24 hours, she feels terrible. Severe nausea, weakness, tremors that are even worse than usual. She thinks she's sick. She doesn't understand that these are withdrawal symptoms. Her body has become accustomed to the constant presence of arsenic in her system. When she stops, her body reacts badly. It's not true physiological addiction like with opioids, but the effect is similar. So she keeps taking them, because stopping feels worse than continuing. 3 wafers per day, 4.5 milligrams of arsenic daily. Month 4, July 1857. Serafina is engaged now. The wedding is set for October. She should be happy, but she's not. She's sick, constantly, relentlessly sick. The vomiting is daily now. She can barely keep food down. Her hair has thinned to the point where she has to wear a hairpiece, false hair purchased from another woman attached to her own thinning strands. The tremors in her hands are so bad that she can't write letters anymore. She has to dictate them to her maid. The numbness has spread from her feet to her ankles, up her calves. Walking is becoming difficult, and she's lost 30 pounds. At 5'4", she's down to 98 pounds. William notices. Of course he notices. But when he asks what's wrong, she tells him she's just nervous about the wedding, that she's been feeling delicate lately. He accepts this explanation because it fits with everything he's been taught about women. Women are delicate. Women are prone to mysterious ailments. It's their nature. In late July, something happens that will change everything. Serafina faints during a tea party. Not just a brief spell, she collapses completely and doesn't wake up for several minutes. When she comes to, she's trembling, confused, struggling to speak clearly. One of the women at the party is Cordelia Ashford, William's cousin, the woman who's been documenting her own corset-related symptoms in a secret journal. Cordelia looks at Serafina, really looks at her and sees something terrifying. Translucent skin, yes, but not healthy translucent. Corpse translucent. Thinning hair poorly concealed by a hairpiece. Hands that shake constantly. A body so thin it looks skeletal. And something else. Something Cordelia recognizes from medical texts she's been secretly reading at the library. White lines across the fingernails. Cordelia has read about arsenic poisoning. The symptoms match perfectly. After the party, she pulls Serafina aside. "Are you taking something for your skin?" Serafina hesitates, then admits it. "The arsenical wafers. From Dr. Mortimer." Cordelia's face goes pale. "How long?" "Oh, 4 months, Dr. Mortimer says. Dr. Mortimer is killing you." Let me pause here and show you the full scale of what's happening to Serafina's body. Arsenic is an insidious poison. It doesn't kill you quickly. It accumulates in your tissues, your liver, your kidneys, your bones, and slowly destroys them. The translucent skin that Serafina wanted, that's not healthy pallor. That's reduced blood flow from damaged blood vessels. The weight loss arsenic causes chronic gastrointestinal damage. It destroys the lining of your stomach and intestines. You can't properly digest food or absorb nutrients. The hair loss arsenic accumulates in hair follicles and kills them. The tremors and numbness arsenic destroys the myelin sheaths around your nerves. It's literally eating away at your nervous system. The white lines on her nails, those are Mies lines. They appear because arsenic disrupts keratin production. Each line represents a period of acute exposure. By month 4, Serafina has accumulated approximately 540 milligrams of arsenic in her body. She has exceeded the lethal threshold by a factor of 2, maybe 3. She's going to die. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon, unless she stops. Now. Cordelia takes Serafina to see Dr. Samuel Brooks, a progressive physician who's been quietly documenting the medical harms of corsets and other fashion devices. Dr. Brooks examines Serafina carefully. He tests her hair, her nails. He asks detailed questions about her symptoms. His diagnosis is immediate and certain chronic arsenic poisoning. "If you stop now," he tells her, "you may recover. Your liver is damaged but not destroyed. Your kidneys are functioning though impaired. But if you continue, you'll likely be dead within 2 years." Serafina sits there taking this in. "But my skin," she says. "William loves how pale I am. He says I look like porcelain." Dr. Brooks leans forward. "You'll look like a corpse if you continue. Is that the aesthetic you're aiming for? It's harsh, but it's true." Serafina asks the question that's been haunting her. "If I stop, will my skin stay pale?" Dr. Brooks shakes his head. "The pallor will fade as your blood vessels heal. The freckles will likely return." There it is, the impossible choice. Stop taking arsenic and lose the complexion that made William propose. Or continue and die slowly, painfully, with your organs shutting down one by one. This is what the system does. It makes dying seem preferable to being unattractive. Let me show you the economics of this poison. Dr. Vivian Mortimer charges $2 per box. Each box contains 30 wafers. She sells on average 200 boxes per month to desperate women across Philadelphia. Do the arithmetic, $400 per month from arsenic wafers alone. In 1857 currency, that's approximately $13,000 per month in today's purchasing power. But that's not all she sells. She also offers arsenical complexion creams, arsenical face powders, arsenical soaps. Her total monthly revenue runs to about $8,000 in 1857 currency. That translates to roughly $268,000 per month in modern terms. The cost to produce Fowler's solution, the arsenic mixture in the wafers, about 15 cents per box. She's selling them for $2. That's over a 1,300% markup. Over her 4-year operation in Philadelphia from 1855 to 1859, Dr. Mortimer will accumulate approximately $384,000. Adjusted to modern purchasing power, that's $12.8 million. From selling poison to desperate women. Now, let's scale this up. Let's look at the national picture. Conservative estimates suggest that about 1% of American women used arsenical beauty products in the 1850s and 60s. 1% doesn't sound like much. But remember, in 1860, there were 16 million American women between the ages of 15 and 50. 1% of 16 million is 160,000 women. If each of them spent $6 per year on arsenical products, a conservative estimate, that's $960,000 per year in 1860 currency. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $32 million per year in today's economy. Per year. On literal poison. And the death toll we'll never know exactly. Because most arsenic poisoning deaths were recorded as natural causes, or consumption, or nervous exhaustion. But based on documented cases and statistical modeling, researchers estimate between 10,000 and 16,000 American women died from arsenical cosmetics between 1850 and 1870. 10 to 16,000 deaths in 20 years. From beauty products. September 1857, Serafina has made her choice. She's going to stop taking the arsenic. It's been 5 days since she last took a wafer. The withdrawal is brutal. She's nauseous constantly. The tremors are worse than ever. She can barely get out of bed. But she's committed. She's going to survive this. William has broken their engagement. When her skin started to lose its translucent quality, when the freckles began returning, when she looked less like porcelain and more like a normal human being, William's interest evaporated. He didn't even have the decency to do it face to face. He sent a letter. Upon reflection, I believe we are not well suited. I wish you every happiness in your future. Serafina is 23 years old. She's been poisoned for 6 months. She's lost her fiancé. She's facing permanent damage to her nervous system, her liver, her hair. And she's one of the lucky ones, because she's alive. Let me tell you about the women who weren't lucky. In 1858, a young woman named Catherine Wright died in Boston. She was 19. She'd been taking arsenical wafers for 8 months. The official cause of death was listed as consumption. But her family knew the truth. They found the boxes of wafers in her room. Dozens of them. In 1859, 2 sisters in Baltimore died within 3 weeks of each other. Rebecca and Sarah Morrison, ages 24 and 26, both had been using arsenical face cream from the same manufacturer. Their deaths were listed as fever. In 1860, Emma Harrison in New York, 25 years old, arsenical powder, dead after 10 months of use. Cause of death, nervous exhaustion. These are just the cases we know about. The ones where family members kept records. The ones where the connection to arsenic was obvious enough that someone wrote it down. How many more were there? How many women died slowly, painfully, thinking they were just delicate, just prone to mysterious feminine ailments? How many families never knew that the beauty products killed their daughters? We'll never know the full count. But the evidence we do have suggests it was thousands, easily thousands. And here's the thing that should enrage you. The manufacturers knew. They absolutely knew. Arsenic has been recognized as a poison since ancient times. The Romans used it for assassinations. Everyone knew it could kill, but the manufacturers had a defense. It's been used for centuries by royalty. This was technically true. Some European aristocrats did use small amounts of arsenic-based cosmetics. Of course, many of those aristocrats also died young of mysterious illnesses, but that detail was conveniently omitted from the advertisements. The manufacturers also claimed the doses were medicinal and carefully controlled. This was a lie. There was no quality control, no standardization. One batch might contain twice as much arsenic as another. Users had no way to know. And the claim that it was safe in small doses, also a lie. Because arsenic is cumulative. It builds up. What's safe today becomes lethal after 6 months of daily use. The manufacturers knew all of this. They chose profit over lives. Let me take you to a different kind of poison now. A different kind of control. Because while Serafina was poisoning her body with arsenic, another woman was being poisoned by the medical establishment itself. Her name is Theodora Monroe. She's 24 years old. She's been married for 18 months to Jonathan Monroe, an attorney with a successful practice in New York. Theodora has had 2 miscarriages in the past 18 months. She doesn't know why. Her doctor doesn't know why, or claims not to. But I can tell you why. It's because Theodora wears a corset laced to 20 inches. And she continued wearing it during both pregnancies because her husband insisted. Jonathan Monroe believes that a pregnant woman should maintain proper appearance. He believes that letting yourself go to seed during pregnancy shows a lack of moral fiber. So Theodora stayed corseted through her first trimester, through her second, until the bleeding started and the pregnancy ended. Twice. After the second miscarriage, Theodora goes to see her physician, Dr. Howard Whitmore. Dr. Whitmore examines her. He asks questions about her symptoms, and then he delivers his diagnosis. Mrs. Monroe, you're suffering from hysteria. Hysteria, that word. Let me explain what hysteria meant in 1857. The word comes from the Greek word for uterus. Ancient physicians believed that the uterus could literally wander around inside a woman's body, causing all sorts of problems. By the 19th century, doctors knew that wasn't literally true, but they still believed that the female reproductive system was the source of women's supposed emotional and mental fragility. Hysteria became a catch-all diagnosis for any woman who presented symptoms that doctors couldn't explain or didn't want to deal with. Feeling anxious, hysteria. Can't sleep, hysteria. Experiencing pain, hysteria. Sad, hysteria. Angry, definitely hysteria. Questioning your husband's authority, acute hysteria. Reading too much, hysteria with intellectual delusions. The diagnosis wasn't based on any objective medical criteria. It was based on whether a woman's behavior or symptoms made her difficult to manage. And the treatments for hysteria, they range from benign to absolutely horrific. Dr. Whitmore prescribes the rest cure for Theodora. The rest cure. Let me describe what this actually meant. Theodora is to be confined to bed for 8 weeks, minimum. She's forbidden from sitting up except for meals. She's forbidden from any physical activity. No walking, no light exercise, nothing. She's forbidden from any mental activity. No reading, no writing, no needlework, no visitors who might engage her in stimulating conversation. She's to be fed a rich diet of milk and meat, 4,000 calories per day. The goal is to fatten her up because thinness was associated with hysteria, and she's to be kept in isolation. Removed from her family, placed in a private rest facility for 8 weeks. The cost $50 per week. In modern purchasing power, that's $1,675 per week. Total cost for the 8-week treatment, $13,400 in today's money. To lock a woman in a room, force-feed her, and take away her books. This was considered cutting-edge medical treatment. Let me show you what this actually was: punishment for being difficult. You see, Theodora had started asking questions after her second miscarriage. Questions like, could my corset have contributed to this? And should I perhaps loosen it if I become pregnant again? These questions made her husband uncomfortable. They made her doctor uncomfortable. So the diagnosis became hysteria, and the treatment became enforced isolation and sensory deprivation. Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell, the physician who popularized the rest cure, wrote in 1873, the patient must be isolated from all sources of mental excitement. Reading, writing, and even conversation must be prohibited. The female brain, already weakened by hysteria, requires complete rest to recover its natural docility. Natural docility, that's the goal, not health, not recovery. Docility, making difficult women compliant again. Theodora spends 8 weeks in the rest facility. She's not allowed to read, not allowed to write, not allowed to think. She lies in bed staring at the ceiling, but feeling her mind slowly deteriorate from lack of stimulation. By week 4, she's begging to be released. She promises to be better, to stop asking questions, to stop complaining. Dr. Whitmore tells her she's not ready. She needs more rest. By week 8, when she's finally released, Theodora is a different person. Quieter, more withdrawn, more compliant, mission accomplished. She returns home. Her husband is pleased. She seems more settled, he says. More like herself. Within 2 months, Theodora is pregnant again. This time she says nothing about the corset. She wears it throughout the pregnancy, laced as tight as her growing belly will allow. This pregnancy makes it to term. She gives birth to a healthy daughter in June 1858. But the delivery is difficult. Theodora's corseted muscles are weak. She can barely push. The doctor has to use forceps. She survives. The baby survives. But Theodora will spend the rest of her life dealing with complications from that delivery. Pelvic organ prolapse, chronic pain, incontinence. These are direct results of corseting during pregnancy and weakened muscles from years of external support. But when she complains about these symptoms to her doctor, he tells her it's just the natural weakness of the female body. Nothing to be done. She never mentions the corset as a possible cause. She learned her lesson. Ask questions, get locked up. Let me show you the scale of this. Between 1850 and 1870, 3,350 women were committed to asylums for hysteria in Pennsylvania and New York alone. 3,350 women in just 2 states in 20 years. What were their crimes? What got them committed? 18% were committed for refusing husbands' advances. They said no to sex. 12% for reading novels excessively. They read books. 8% for political agitation. They expressed opinions about suffrage or abolition. 23% for insubordination to father or husband. They talked back. 39% for melancholy or sadness. They were sad. The average stay was 14 months. 14 months of isolation, of forced rest, of sensory deprivation, of psychological torture masquerading as medical treatment. The financial cost per patient, $40 per month in asylum fees, times 14 months average, stay equals $560 total. That's $18,800 in today's purchasing power. Multiply by 3,350 patients, and you're looking at an industry worth approximately $63 million in modern terms. $63 million spent imprisoning women whose only crime was being difficult. And this is just 2 states. Scale this nationally, and you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in today's money. An entire industry built on punishing female noncompliance. Now I need to tell you about a lie you've probably heard. A comforting lie. A lie that's been repeated so often that most people believe it's true. The vibrator myth. You've probably heard this story. Victorian doctors treated hysteria with pelvic massage. They would manually stimulate women to orgasm called a hysterical paroxysm as treatment, and when doctors got tired of doing this manually, they invented the vibrator to make the job easier. It's a scandalous story, a titillating story, and it's been repeated in books, documentaries, museum exhibits, even a major Hollywood film. There's just one problem. It's completely false. In 1999, a historian named Rachel Maines published a book called The Technology of Orgasm. In it, she argued that Victorian doctors routinely treated hysteria with genital massage, and that the electromechanical vibrator was invented for this purpose. The book won awards. It was cited in dozens of scholarly works. A documentary was made in 2007, a Tony-nominated play in 2009, a film starring Maggie Gyllenhaal in 2011. Everyone believed it because it was a good story. But in 2018, 2 researchers named Hallie Lieberman and Eric Schatzberg decided to actually check Maine's sources. They went back to every medical text, every advertisement, every piece of evidence that Maine's had cited. And what they found was shocking. Not a single source supported her claims. Not one. Maine's had cited texts about vibrators, but those texts recommended using them for muscle aches for pain relief, not for treating women's genitals. She cited texts about hysteria treatment, but those texts didn't mention genital massage or orgasms at all. Lieberman and Schatzberg published their findings in an academic journal. The vibrator hysteria story was completely fabricated, and yet the myth persists. Because it's a comforting myth, it's scandalous enough to be interesting, but sanitized enough to be acceptable. It lets us feel smugly superior to the Victorians, while also being slightly titillated by their supposed sexual hypocrisy. But it's not true. So what were the actual treatments for hysteria rest? Isolation, removal of mental stimulation, confinement to asylums, force feeding, in extreme cases, surgery, removal of the ovaries, clitoridectomy. These were real treatments, documented treatments, treatments that destroyed lives. But the vibrator story is more fun to talk about at parties. So that's the one that spread. Here's why this matters. The vibrator myth is a lie that makes Victorian medicine look bumbling and hypocritical, but ultimately harmless. The truth that medicine locked women in asylums, force-fed them, isolated them, broke them is harder to face. The myth lets us laugh. The truth demands we rage. And the system prefers we laugh. Because rage leads to questions. Questions like, is modern medicine still doing this? Are doctors still dismissing women's pain? Are women still being gaslit by the medical establishment? And the answer to all those questions is yes. Studies show that women wait longer in emergency rooms than men. Women receive less pain medication than men for the same conditions. Women are more likely to have their symptoms dismissed as psychological. In 2022, the National Institutes of Health published a study showing that 80% of American women report having their pain dismissed or minimized by doctors at some point in their lives. 80%. The specific diagnosis of hysteria is gone. But the underlying attitude that women's complaints shouldn't be taken seriously, that women's pain is somehow less real than men's pain, that women are more emotional and less rational, that hasn't disappeared. It just took new forms. November 1st, 1857. 2 days before Cordelia Ashford's scheduled wedding. But there's not going to be a wedding. Because this morning, Cordelia wrote a letter to Lucian Aldridge breaking their engagement. The letter was simple and direct. I cannot marry a man who requires me to harm my body to meet his aesthetic preferences. She sent Bridget to deliver it. What Cordelia doesn't know is that Lucian has been planning for this possibility. At noon, Lucian arrives at the Ashford townhouse. But he's not alone. He's brought Dr. Richard Whitmore, husband of the society matron, who's been orchestrating much of the social pressure on Cordelia. Dr. Whitmore is also the director of Blackwell's Island Asylum. They have papers, commitment papers. And Cordelia's father, desperate and financially ruined, has already signed them. The accusation is simple, acute hysteria. The evidence: Cordelia refused marriage. She's been reading medical texts. She's shown an unnatural interest in women's health issues. She's been documenting her corset-related symptoms in a journal. According to Dr. Whitmore, these are classic signs of nervous excitement and moral insanity. Cordelia tries to protest. "I'm not insane. I'm trying to save myself from—" But it's too late. Two attendants physically restrain her. Her father won't look at her. "This is for your own good, Cordelia," he says. "You're not thinking clearly. The doctors will help you." They take her. Within 2 hours, Cordelia Ashford is imprisoned in Blackwell's Island Asylum. She's been committed for the crime of saying no. And this is where part 2 ends. With Cordelia in a cell, Serafina recovering from arsenic poisoning, Theodora broken by the rest cure. 3 women, 3 different forms of poison, all serving the same mechanism of control. But the story doesn't end here. Because while Cordelia is locked in Blackwell's Island, something is happening outside those walls. Her friends Serafina, Theodora the intellectual, Octavia Preston, the maid Bridget O'Sullivan, they're not going to let this stand. They have evidence. They have testimony. They have the beginning of something that will eventually crack open this entire edifice of oppression. And they have one thing the system didn't count on: they have nothing left to lose. In part 3, I'm going to show you how they fought back. How a small group of desperate women took on a multi-million-dollar industry, a complicit medical establishment, and a social system that had been operating for generations. It won't be a total victory. The corset won't disappear overnight. The arsenic manufacturers won't all go to prison. But they'll start something. They'll plant seeds that will grow for the next 60 years until finally, in the aftermath of a world war, the whole system comes crashing down. And I'm going to show you why that victory matters today. Why understanding how they broke this system can help us break the one that's operating right now. Because the gilded cage is still here. It just changed its design. Stay with me. November 3rd, 1857. Cordelia Ashford has been inside Blackwell's Island Asylum for 48 hours. 48 hours is enough to understand what this place really is. It's not a hospital. It's a prison for inconvenient women. The cell is 8 feet by 10 feet. A barred window looks out over the East River. A straw mattress on an iron frame. A chamber pot in the corner. Nothing else. They stripped her when she arrived, took her clothes, her possessions. The journal where she'd been documenting her corset-related symptoms, 200 pages of careful observations, dates, measurements confiscated. Probably destroyed by now. They dressed her in a rough cotton shift. No corset, ironically. No crinoline. Just the thin shift and the constant cold. The treatment began immediately. The rest cure, modified for asylum use. 23 hours per day in bed, mandatory. If you try to sit up outside of mealtimes, the attendants force you back down. No books, no writing materials, no stimulation of any kind. Meals brought to the cell. Gruel, bread, occasionally meat that's more gristle than anything else. 3 times per day, an attendant checks to make sure you're still breathing. Otherwise, you're alone. With your thoughts, your fear, your rage. This is designed to break you. And it works. Cordelia can already feel it happening. The isolation pressing in, the boredom becoming physical pain. The desperate craving for any kind of mental engagement. She understands now why women confess, why they agree to anything, why they emerge from places like this docile and compliant. It's not because the treatment works. It's because after enough time in sensory deprivation, you'll say anything, agree to anything, just to make it stop. But Cordelia has one advantage. She knows something the asylum directors don't. Outside these walls, her allies are preparing to fight back. The same day, November 3rd, a townhouse on 5th Avenue, Manhattan. 5 women sit in a drawing room. All of them have removed their corsets. A small act of rebellion, but significant. Serafina Hartford, 23, 3 weeks into arsenic withdrawal. Her hands still shake. Her hair is still thin. But she's alive and getting stronger. Theodora Monroe, 24, still recovering from the psychological trauma of the rest cure. Still dealing with the physical aftermath of her corseted pregnancy. Octavia Preston, 25, the only unmarried woman in the group by choice. Sharp-tongued, well-read, politically radical. She's been secretly attending abolitionist meetings and reading suffragist literature. Bridget O'Sullivan, 19, Cordelia's maid. Irish immigrant. Working class. She's seen more than any of them because servants see everything. And one more person, Dr. Samuel Brooks, 53, the physician who examined both Cordelia and Serafina. The man who's been quietly documenting corset injuries for years, waiting for the right moment to speak out. Dr. Brooks speaks first. Cordelia has been committed to Blackwell's Island. Her father signed the papers. Lucian Aldridge orchestrated it with Dr. Whitmore's help. Silence. They all knew this might happen, but hearing it confirmed is still devastating. Octavia breaks the silence. How long until they break her? Dr. Brooks shakes his head. Days, maybe a week. The isolation is designed to destroy the mind. Even the strongest person can't withstand it indefinitely. Serafina leans forward. Then we have days. What can we do? We expose the whole system, Octavia says. Not just Cordelia's imprisonment, everything, the corsets, the arsenic, the medical gaslighting. We make it public. We make it impossible to ignore. Theodora speaks up, her voice quiet but firm. I'll testify about the rest cure, about what Dr. Whitmore did to me. Serafina nods. And I'll testify about Dr. Vivian Mortimer, about the arsenic. Bridget adds, I can get testimonies from other servants. We see everything. The fainting, the pain, the blood. Nobody asks us, but we see it all. Dr. Brooks pulls out a leather folder. I have medical records for 47 women who've been injured by corsets. 12 deaths in the past 3 years in New York alone. I have documentation of Cordelia's compressed ribs and displaced organs. And I have Serafina's test results proving arsenic poisoning. He spreads the documents on the table. This is evidence, real documented evidence. But we need a platform. We need someone willing to publish this. Octavia smiles. I know someone. Horace Greeley, editor of the New York Tribune. Everyone knows that name. Greeley is famous, notorious, depending on who you ask. He's an abolitionist, a reformer, a man who uses his newspaper to challenge social norms. Will he listen, Doctor? Brooks asks. If we give him a story this big, if we give him evidence, he'll listen. Let me tell you about Horace Greeley, born 1811 in New Hampshire, founded the New York Tribune in 1841. By 1857, it's one of the most influential newspapers in America with a daily circulation of about 50,000 copies. Greeley is a reformer by nature. He's published pieces advocating for the abolition of slavery, for labor rights, for westward expansion. His motto is, Go West, young man. Though he borrowed that phrase from someone else, he's also published several pieces about women's rights. Not many, this is 1857 after all, but enough to establish that he's sympathetic to the cause. Most importantly, Greeley understands that scandal sells newspapers. And what Octavia is offering him is the biggest scandal of the year. She visits him on November 4th. She brings the evidence, Dr. Brooks's documentation, Serafina's medical records, Bridget's testimonies from servants. And she brings one more thing, Cordelia's asylum commitment papers. Greeley reads through everything. He's silent for a long time. Finally, he looks up. You understand what publishing this means. The backlash will be severe. These are powerful industries, powerful doctors, powerful families. Octavia meets his eyes. I understand. Publish it anyway. Greeley nods. Give me 24 hours to write this properly. It publishes November 6th. November 6th, 3 days from now. 3 days for Cordelia to survive in Blackwell's Island. Octavia agrees. Inside Blackwell's Island, Cordelia is trying to hold on. It's day 3, 72 hours of isolation. She's discovered that the human mind isn't meant for this. We're social creatures. We need stimulation. We need interaction. We need something to think about beyond our own thoughts eating themselves in circles. She's taken to counting the bricks in the wall, counting her breaths, counting the seconds until the next meal. Anything to give her mind something to do. She's also composing in her head. She can't write, but she can remember. She's mentally drafting testimony. Everything she wants to say about the corsets, the crinolines, the whole system of control. She's organizing it by topic, by date, by specific incidents. If she ever gets out of here, she'll write it all down, every word. She's memorizing it now, rehearsing it in her mind, making sure she won't forget. This is how she's surviving, by refusing to let her mind go empty, by holding on to purpose. On day 4, something changes. Another woman is brought to the cell across from hers. Cordelia can hear the commotion. The woman is fighting, screaming. I'm not mad, I just refuse to marry the man my father chose. That's not madness, that's not... The door slams. The screaming continues for another hour, then subsides into sobbing. Cordelia waits until the guards are gone. Then she whispers through the door, I can hear you. You're not alone. Silence. Then a voice hoarse from screaming. Who are you? My name is Cordelia Ashford. I was committed 3 days ago for breaking my engagement and reading medical journals. A bitter laugh from across the hall. I'm Ada Beaumont, committed for attending a dress reform meeting. Cordelia's heart leaps. Dress reform? You mean the Rational Dress Society? You've heard of it. I have pamphlets from them, hidden in my... She stops. She had pamphlets. They were confiscated with everything else. Ada's voice is bitter. I've been here since 1855. 2 years. My father committed me to cure my radicalism. 2 years. Cordelia feels sick. 2 years in isolation would destroy anyone. How are you still sane, she whispers. Who says I am? There's truth in that. But there's also something else. A spark of dark humor. A refusal to be completely broken. Over the next day, Cordelia and Ada talk whenever the guards aren't listening. They whisper through the doors. They share their stories. Ada tells her about the Rational Dress Society, about women in Boston who are actually fighting this system, who are designing clothing that doesn't require compression or cages, who are publishing pamphlets about the harm these devices cause. It's everything Cordelia has been thinking about but organized, collective, movement. They're still active, Cordelia asks. As of 2 years ago, yes. I don't know what's happened since, but they were growing, getting stronger. Cordelia files this away. If she gets out when she gets out, she's finding these women. But right now, that seems impossible, because on day 5, Dr. Whitmore comes to evaluate her. Dr. Richard Whitmore is 58 years old. He's been director of Blackwell's Island since 1850. He's committed hundreds of women over the years. He enters Cordelia's cell with an attendant. Cordelia is required to stand, though days of forced bed rest have made her weak. Miss Ashford, he says, his tone professionally pleasant. How are we feeling today? Cordelia knows this is a trap. Anything she says can be used as evidence of continued hysteria. If she says she's fine, she's in denial. If she says she's suffering, she's confirmed as mentally unwell. If she's angry, she's showing excessive emotion. If she's calm, she's showing unnatural effect. There's no right answer. The system is designed so she can't win. She chooses honesty. I'm being held against my will for the crime of refusing a marriage that would have harmed my health. I'm not insane. I'm imprisoned. Dr. Whitmore makes a note. Persecutory delusions, inability to accept proper female role, continued intellectual agitation. He looks at her. Miss Ashford, I'm prepared to release you. All you need to do is agree to 3 conditions. First, agree to marry Mr. Aldridge. Second, renounce these radical ideas about corsets and women's health. Third, make a public statement that you were temporarily unwell but are now recovered. Cordelia looks at him. This is the moment. This is the test. If she agrees, she goes free, but she goes back into the corset, back into the engagement, back into silence. If she refuses, she stays here. For weeks, months, maybe years like Ada. She thinks about Ada. 2 years of this. 2 years of isolation that's left her broken docile destroyed. She thinks about Serafina poisoning herself for months because the alternative was being unmarriageable. She thinks about Theodora force-fed and isolated until she learned to stop asking questions. She thinks about Margaret Davy, 14 years old, burning to death in her crinoline. And she thinks about the women outside these walls. Octavia Serafina, Theodora Bridget, Dr. Brooks, her allies. Fighting for her, she makes her choice. No, Dr. Whitmore's expression doesn't change. I see. Then you'll remain here until you're ready to be reasonable. He leaves. Cordelia sits back down on the straw mattress. She's shaking, not from fear, from rage, but she's also calculating. Dr. Whitmore said remain here, not be transferred to long-term commitment. That means he's not sure of his position. That means there's pressure somewhere. That means something is happening outside. She just has to survive long enough for it to work. November 6, 1857. The New York Tribune hits the streets at dawn. The headline in large, bold type, "The Devices That Kill: How Fashion and Medicine Conspire to Murder American Women." Below it, a subheading, "Exclusive Investigation Reveals Death Toll in Thousands, Profits in Millions, Medical Complicity Proven." Horace Greeley didn't just publish the evidence. He wrote a comprehensive exposé, 6 full pages. Page 1, Cordelia's story. Documentation of her compressed ribs. Dr. Brooks's medical testimony about the physical damage caused by tight lacing. Page 2, the crinoline fire deaths. 3,047 documented deaths. Names, ages, dates. The Continental Theater fire described in detail. Page 3, Serafina's arsenic poisoning. The chemistry explained. Dr. Vivian Mortimer named directly. The economics calculated. Page 4, the hysteria diagnosis. Theodora's rest cure testimony. The statistics on asylum commitments. The real reasons women were imprisoned. Page 5. The financial breakdown. The corset industry. The arsenical cosmetics market. The asylum system. All adding up to hundreds of millions in today's currency. Page 6. Cordelia's asylum commitment papers. Reproduced in full, showing exactly how a woman could be imprisoned for refusing marriage. The final paragraph is Greeley's own editorial, Gentlemen of America. What have we become? We claim to be a nation of liberty, yet we imprison our daughters in devices that crush their ribs and displace their organs. We poison them with arsenic and call it beauty. We lock them in asylums for the crime of independent thought. We profit from their suffering to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And we call this civilization. This editor calls it barbarism, and it must end. The reaction is immediate. By mid-morning, the Tribune's offices are flooded. Some letters are supportive, many are outraged. The corset manufacturers issue statements calling the article sensationalist and based on extreme cases. The medical establishment is divided. Some doctors come forward with their own evidence supporting Dr. Brooks. Others denounce him as an alarmist. But the most important reaction comes from somewhere unexpected. Women. By afternoon, groups of women are gathering outside the Tribune offices. Some are there to protest the article, but most are there to share their own stories. I had 3 miscarriages before I stopped tight-lacing. My sister died from a crinoline fire in 1862. I was in Blackwell's Island for 6 months for refusing my father's choice of husband. I've been taking arsenical wafers for a year. I didn't know they were poison. The stories pour in, dozens, then hundreds. By evening, the New York State Legislature has announced an investigation into asylum commitment practices. By the next morning, November 7th, the Women's Rights Convention organizers, the same women who organized the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, have issued a statement demanding Cordelia's release and calling for dress reform. The pressure is building, and Dr. Richard Whitmore can feel it. November 10th, 1857. Cordelia has been in Blackwell's Island for 7 days. 7 days is enough to change you. She's lost weight. Her hands shake slightly. Her mind feels fragile in a way it never has before. But she's still here, still sane, still refusing. At 10 in the morning, Dr. Whitmore comes to her cell again, but this time he's not offering conditions. You're being released, Miss Ashford. The public pressure has made your continued commitment imprudent. Cordelia stands. She doesn't trust this. And the conditions? There are no conditions. You're free to go. She doesn't believe it until she's actually walking out of the asylum. Until she sees Octavia waiting for her with the carriage. Octavia embraces her. You held out. You won. Cordelia shakes her head. We won, all of us. In the carriage, Octavia fills her in. The article, the public reaction, the legislative investigation. And there's more, Octavia says. Dr. Vivian Mortimer has been arrested. Philadelphia police. Fraud and manslaughter charges. Cordelia closes her eyes. Relief washes over her. How many charges? 3 counts of manslaughter. They've identified 3 deaths directly linked to her arsenical products. There are 47 other cases of poisoning, including Serafina's. 3 counts. Not enough. There should be more. But it's a start. When's the trial? December. They want Serafina to testify. December 15th, 1857. Philadelphia courthouse. Doctor. Vivian Mortimer sits at the defense table, still impeccably dressed, still maintaining her air of professional competence. The prosecution presents its case first. They bring in the families of the 3 women who died. Catherine Wright, 19. Rebecca and Sarah Morrison, 24 and 26. All died after extended use of Mortimer's arsenical wafers. They present Mortimer's financial records. $15,000 in profit over 4 years. $12.8 million in today's money. They present the chemical analysis of the wafers. 1% potassium arsenite, enough to kill given time. And then they call Serafina Hartford to the stand. Serafina is 23 years old. She's been arsenic-free for 2 months now. Her hair is still thin. Her hands still shake slightly. She'll carry these effects for the rest of her life. But she's alive, and she's furious. The prosecutor asks her to describe her experience. Serafina speaks for 40 minutes. She describes buying the wafers, taking them daily, watching her skin pale while her body deteriorated. The nausea, the hair loss, the tremors, the numbness. She describes going back to Dr. Mortimer with complaints, being told to increase the dose. She told me I was purging impurities, Serafina says. She told me the symptoms meant it was working. She told me stopping suddenly would be dangerous. She created the addiction, then profited from it. She looks directly at Mortimer. When I begged her for help with the side effects, she sold me more poison. That's not medicine. That's murder. The defense attorney tries to argue that Serafina chose to take the wafers, that Mortimer simply provided a product women demanded. The prosecutor stands up for rebuttal. The defense argues choice. But how can it be choice when the product is sold under false pretenses? When it's marketed as safe, when the seller knows it's poison, when the seller actively encourages increased use despite visible harm? That's not choice. That's fraud. That's exploitation. That's manslaughter. The jury deliberates for 3 hours. They return with a verdict: guilty on all 3 counts of manslaughter. The sentence, 15 years in prison. It's lenient by modern standards. 3 women are dead, 47 more were poisoned, and Mortimer gets 15 years. But in 1857, it's unprecedented. This is the first time the beauty industry has been held legally accountable for harming women. Serafina collapses, crying when the verdict is read. Theodora, watching from the gallery, holds her. "You saved the next 100 women who would have walked into her office," she whispers. It's true. After this trial, our cynical cosmetics start to fall out of favor. Not immediately, not completely. But the trend begins. By 1858, New York becomes the first state to ban arsenic in cosmetics. By 1863, more states follow. By 1870, the practice is nearly extinct in America. Thousands of women, maybe more, saved because Serafina was willing to testify. Because she was willing to stand up and say, "This harmed me and it was wrong." But Serafina's trial is just one victory. The larger system is still operating. Corsets are still being sold by the millions. Crinolines are still killing women, though the numbers are declining as the fashion shifts toward bustles. The medical establishment is still committing women to asylums for hysteria, though the public scrutiny has made them slightly more cautious. The real change won't come for decades. Let me show you how it happens. 1858. Octavia Preston and Cordelia Ashford co-found the New York chapter of the Rational Dress Society. They publish a manifesto. 3 simple rules. 1. No garment should weigh more than 7 pounds. 2. All undergarments should hang from the shoulders, not compress the waist. 3. A freedom of movement must not be sacrificed for fashion. Membership in 1858, 47 women. Membership in 1863, 112 women. Membership in 1865, 1,840 women across 12 states. It's growing, slowly, but it's growing. Dr. Samuel Brooks founds the Society for Women's Health Reform. He publishes his medical research. He testifies before state legislatures. By 1859, medical journals are publishing corset harm studies. Not many, but enough to start shifting the conversation. The fashion industry fights back, of course. They publish advertisements emphasizing the beauty and respectability of proper corseting. They hire their own doctors to publish studies claiming corsets are beneficial. But the evidence is piling up. And more importantly, women are starting to talk about their experiences. The silence is breaking. 1 week after Cordelia's release from Blackwell's Island, the 5 women gather again. This time they're celebrating. Cordelia, Serafina, Theodora, Octavia, and Bridget sit in Octavia's drawing room. No corsets, no crinolines, just 5 women breathing freely. "We did something," Cordelia says. "It's not enough. It's not nearly enough. But we did something." Octavia raises her glass to small victories and to the larger ones coming. They drink, but they also know the truth. This fight is just beginning. The corset industry won't collapse because of one newspaper article. The medical establishment won't stop committing women because of one legislative investigation. Change will be slow, incremental, generational, but it will come because they've proven something important. The system can be challenged. The silence can be broken. The cage can be seen for what it is. And once you see the cage, you can't unsee it. 1895. 38 years later, the bicycle craze hits America. By 1895, 500,000 bicycles are sold in the United States. 200,000 of them are purchased by women. And here's the thing: you cannot ride a bicycle in a corset and crinoline. It's physically impossible. The corset prevents you from bending forward to reach the handlebars. The crinoline cage gets caught in the wheels. So women who want to cycle, and many of them desperately want to cycle because it's fun and liberating and socially acceptable, have to innovate. They start wearing bloomers, loose trousers under a knee-length skirt. No corset required. The initial reaction is scandal. Women in trousers, outrageous. But the bicycle is too popular to resist. By 1897, bloomers for cycling are normalized. And once women have experienced the freedom of moving without a corset, many of them don't want to go back. The statistics tell the story. 1890, 95% of American women wear corsets daily. 1900, 78%. 1910, 52%. 1920 to 12%. The bicycle did what decades of activism couldn't. It made the corset impractical for an activity that women actually wanted to do. Remember earlier when I talked about systems changing? When the cost of maintaining them exceeds the benefit, the cost of wearing a corset, missing out on cycling, finally exceeded the social benefit of conforming to beauty standards. But the real catalyst comes in 1914, World War I. When the war begins, 4.7 million American men are eventually drafted or enlisted. Women step into their jobs, factories, offices, farms, and you cannot work a 10-hour factory shift in a corset. You physically cannot do it. You'll faint. You'll collapse. You'll be useless. In 1917, the War Industries Board issues a recommendation. Women engaged in war production should dress practically. Corsets impede productivity and present safety hazards in machinery operation. The government is asking women to stop wearing corsets for the war effort. And here's the beautiful irony. Each corset contains about 1.5 pounds of steel. 12 million women wearing corsets equals 18 million pounds of steel. Enough steel to build 2 battleships. The government asks women to donate their corsets for metal recycling. Thousands do. Think about that. It took a war, not women's suffering, not medical evidence, not decades of activism to make society admit that corsets were impractical. When male priority besties winning the war conflicted with female control, corseting, guess which one? But once women stopped wearing corsets for the war, many of them never went back. They'd experienced what it felt like to breathe fully, to move freely, to work without restriction. And they refused to return to the cage. By 1920, only 12% of American women wear corsets daily. The flapper era begins. Loose straight dresses that don't require foundation garments. Hemlines rising to the knee, hair cut short into bobs. The time women save is staggering. Victorian woman's daily beauty routine took roughly 3 hours. The 1920s flapper. About 45 minutes, that's over 2 hours per day reclaimed. Over 700 hours per year. That's 30 full days, an entire month returned to women annually. Over a lifetime, that's years. Literal years of time that can now be spent on education, work, creativity, rest living. October 1920. Cordelia Ashford lies in bed in her Manhattan apartment. She's 85 years old. She's lived an extraordinary life, never married, dedicated herself entirely to dress reform and women's health advocacy. She co-founded the Rational Dress Society. She published 7 books about women's health. She testified before 4 state legislatures. She lectured in 23 cities. And 3 months ago in August 1920, she lived to see the 19th Amendment ratified. Women's suffrage. The right to vote. It took 63 years from that morning in March 1857 when she first realized the corset was wrong. 63 years of fighting. But she saw it. She saw the corsets fall. She saw women vote. Her body never fully recovered from the years of tight lacing. Her ribs still ache. They're still slightly deformed, bent inward from years of compression. But she lived. She spoke. She saw the change begin. 3 days before she dies, a young journalist comes to interview her about the suffrage movement. Near the end of the interview, the journalist asks, "What was the key to breaking the system?" Cordelia thinks for a long moment. "Recognition," she finally says. "The system worked because we didn't recognize it as a system. We thought it was just how things were. Natural, inevitable. Once we recognized it, once we saw the pattern, the profit motive, the deliberate control, we could fight it." She pauses. "The devices changed over my lifetime. The corset gave way to the girdle. The crinoline became the hobble skirt. But the underlying mechanism stayed the same. Make women insecure about their natural bodies, sell them products to fix that insecurity, profit from their suffering." And today, the journalist asks, "Is the system gone?" Cordelia smiles sadly. "The corsets are gone. But watch carefully. The system that profits from women's insecurity never disappears. It just changes products." She dies October 15th, 1920, age 85. She's buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Her gravestone reads simply, "She refused to be caged." Now let me bring you forward to today, to right now, because Cordelia was right. The system didn't disappear. It adapted. Let me show you the modern version of the gilded cage. The corset became Spanx. Skims. Shapewear that promises to smooth and slim and sculpt. The market value of Skims in 2024, $4 billion. Medical warnings about shapewear from a 2022 study, digestive issues in 73% of regular users, breathing restriction in 61%, nerve compression in 41%, the same medical harms as Victorian corsets. Different name, same device. The crinoline fires killed 3,047 women in 9 years. The Brazilian butt lift, a cosmetic surgery where fat is injected into the buttocks, has killed approximately 3,000 women in the past 10 years. 3,000 deaths. Same number, 170 years apart. The arsenical cosmetics that killed Serafina and thousands of others. In 2024, the global skin lightening industry is worth $8.6 billion. The World Health Organization issued a warning in 2019. 60% of tested skin lightening products contain dangerous levels of mercury. Mercury, another poison. Same mechanism as arsenic. Same targets desperate women trying to meet beauty standards. Different century. Same playbook. The hysteria diagnosis that locked women in asylums. It's gone, but the underlying dynamic isn't. Studies show that women wait longer in emergency rooms than men. Women receive less pain medication for the same conditions. 80% of American women report having their pain dismissed or minimized by doctors. The diagnosis changed. The dismissal of women's reported experiences didn't. Now look at the financial picture. The global beauty industry in 2024, $511 billion. The U.S. market, $93.5 billion. Average American woman's annual spending on beauty products, $3,756. Over a lifetime from age 18 to 70, that's $195,312. In 1860, adjusted for inflation, women spent about $500 per year on corsets, cosmetics, and beauty products. Modern women spend 7.5 times more. The system didn't get weaker. It got stronger. It got better at extracting money from women's insecurity. Let me tell you a story. November 2023, a grandmother named Sarah and her 16-year-old granddaughter Emily are having dinner. Emily is upset. She's been looking at Instagram, comparing herself to influencers, feeling inadequate. I need to lose weight, she says. I need to work out more. Maybe I should try that waist trainer thing. Sarah looks at her granddaughter, really looks at her. She sees a healthy, strong, beautiful young woman. But she also sees the system working. Manufacturing insecurity, preparing to extract money and time and life from another generation. Sarah pulls out her phone. She shows Emily an image. It's a Victorian corset, steel boning, compression laces. This is what women wore in the 1800s, she says. It crushed their ribs, displaced their organs, made them faint from lack of oxygen. They wore it because society said their natural bodies weren't acceptable. She scrolls to another image, a modern waist trainer. This is what you're talking about buying. Look at them side by side. Emily stares at the images. That's literally the same thing. Yes, Sarah says, the system never went away. It just got better at making you think it was your choice. They talk for 2 hours about the corsets, about the crinoline fires, about the arsenic, about the women who fought back, about how the cage is still here, how it's always been here, how it will stay here until enough people recognize it and refuse. At the end of the conversation, Emily deletes Instagram from her phone. It's a small act. One person, one choice. But that's how it starts. Cordelia Ashford looked at her compressed ribs in 1857 and thought, this is wrong. She was imprisoned for that realization, but she was right. And because she spoke, because Serafina testified, because Octavia organized, because Theodora survived, because Bridget witnessed, because Dr. Brooks documented the corset fell. It took 70 years. It took a world war. It took technologies the system couldn't control. But it fell. The modern system will fall too. Not because it's weaker, but because every generation some women look at the cage and think, this is wrong. And eventually enough people listen. You're listening now. The devices that controlled your grandmother killed 3,000 women in crinoline fires alone. The devices targeting your granddaughter have killed 3,000 in cosmetic surgery complications. Same number, same system, different era. Your grandmother couldn't vote, couldn't own property, couldn't escape. But you can. You can choose to see the system. You can choose to name it. You can choose to fight it. Here's how: first, recognize the pattern. See the cage you're in. The system works by making the cage invisible, by making it seem like choice. Second, follow the money. Always. Who profits from your granddaughter's insecurity about her body? Fashion industry, cosmetics industry, plastic surgery industry. Instagram's advertising platform. Third, validate the anger. When your daughter complains about beauty standards, don't dismiss it. Recognize it as resistance. Fourth, support the resistance. Body positive movements aren't woke nonsense. They're the modern rational dress society. Same fight, new generation. The gilded cage is still here. But Cordelia showed us something crucial. The lock was always on the inside. Once you see the cage, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you have a choice. Live in it anyway. Or fight. Cordelia chose to fight. She was 22 years old when she made that choice. She was imprisoned for it, labeled insane, lost her chance at marriage and financial security. But she lived to see the corsets fall. She lived to see women vote. She lived to see the beginning of change. That's the legacy. Not that the battle is over, but that the battle is winnable. The system is strong, but it's not invincible. It falls when enough people stop participating, when enough people say no, not anymore, not to my daughter, not to my granddaughter, not to any woman ever again. That's how it ends. Not with a dramatic revolution, but with 1,000 small refusals, 1,000 individual choices, 1,000 people looking at the cage and walking away. The gilded cage is still here, but we know how to break it now. Cordelia showed us how. And that knowledge, that inheritance is ours to use. So use it.